Hello, everybody who is watching the series of podcasts of the European Liberal Forum on the EU integration. Today, we're going to have a friendly discussion with two persons coming from two different countries in the European Union. First, we're going to have Martine Van Schoor, who is from D66 in the Netherlands, a country that has been a founding member of the European Union, or as it was called then, the European Economic Community, and with Milosz Hodun, who is in the board of the European Liberal Forum and who sits in his office in Warsaw, in Poland, a country that was part of the so-called Big Bang of the EU enlargement in 2004. Hi, Martine. Hi, Milosz. How are you today?
Hi, Emil. Doing pretty well.
Yeah, same here. It's good to be with you.
Great. I'm very glad that we can hear each other. And I'm sad, actually, that we are not able to do this in person. But in the interest of time and in the interest of the discussions that are taking place at the very moment in Europe about the future of our continent, let's have the discussion now, inform the audience, and then perhaps continue at a certain other opportunity where we're going to be together. In this series of discussions we had on the European integration itself that is run by the European Liberal Forum, the logo of which you can see both on my left and in the back, we have discussed with a number of people, and we have been focusing on two different aspects. One aspect has been the integration of the European countries in the European Union, and the second aspect has been the question of enlargement. Let's go back first to the issue of the integration project itself. At the beginning, a project driven by the elites in the immediate aftermath of the World War II. Sometimes it was led by external pressures, sometimes it was led by the globalization, but gradually it has become a project that the citizens in most of the European Union took for granted. And just as we thought over the last 2 years that the so-called stress test has been passed with the COVID-19 pandemic, and now we even have common European bonds for recovery, then there was the Russian aggression on Ukraine in February this year, a shock to many. The Netherlands, the country where Martine comes from, was among the core countries that initiated the European integration project, what is now the European Union. Martine, tell us how the people in the Netherlands these days feel about the EU integration as a project.
Thanks, Emil. In preparation, I looked up some numbers because, of course, we love numbers. And if you look over time, you see that 75%, around 75% of the Dutch population still is very positive about the EU membership and the EU as a whole. Whereas in the media, you won't often believe that the number is so high because it's not often what we hear back. But also, if you look at the new or the policy areas that we work on in the EU, support generally is pretty high still. So in that sense, I would say the Netherlands in general is still quite positive about the European Union.
So still there is this hype and there is this hope that what the elites have done some 50, 60 years ago was a project worthwhile. Later on, after the Netherlands has initiated this project long time in the middle of the last century, it was in the aftermath of the fall of the Berlin Wall, in the aftermath of the end of the communist dictatorships in the Central and Eastern Europe, that these new democracies rushed to join the European Economic Community at the beginning, and then the European Union itself. Poland, Milosz, where you're sitting now, was a champion of that process, and it joined the Union in 2004. It was part of the so-called big wave of EU expansion, where over 10 countries joined the club. Together with Poland were a number of your fellow Central European nations, the Visegrad Four, the Baltic countries, Slovenia joined as well. Now, almost a decade and a half later, how do the Poles think about the integration? Has the mood changed? Is it more positive or not?
I think the mood has not changed much in the sense that Poland and Polish people are still probably among the most Euro-enthusiastic nations in the EU. If you look at data, and I would not be as precise as Martine about data, but still around 90% of Polish population is in favor of European integration and wants Poland to be part of the EU. So if you look at Eurobarometer, but also at the Polish surveys, Poles are super Euro enthusiastic. The problem is, I think, that this Euro enthusiasm is actually really shallow or superficial. Because if you dig a dig deeper and you ask people, hey, but do you want to be in the European Union that, for example, supports migration quotas? Then the answer started to be a bit different. And what worries me a lot is that last 8 years of the government, of the populist right-wing government in Poland, we have been exposed to an anti-European propaganda all the time. So we hear all the time that European Union is only about money, European Union is only an ATM for us, and there is nothing else in the EU, only money and trade. So people who hear this more and more, and right now they hear more and more and more often that they will not get this money, they start losing their hope and their faith in the EU. So I think that we are seeing this preparation for more and more anti-European rhetorics. Right now, still, Polish government is too weak to do it, to use this full frontal campaign against the EU, but they are preparing the ground. So there is still big pro-European, pro-EU enthusiasm, but also there is a huge preparation for this anti-European campaign that can strike any time, because this European enthusiasm is rather shallow and there is a big tensions underneath.
Milosz, you said 90%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number. I doubt that there are so many issues that the Poles have actually united behind as what you called European enthusiasm. That means out of 10 Poles, 9 are in favor of the European integration project. That's something that is really astonishing.
Yeah, but this has been like that since the beginning of our accession. You know, when we entered the EU, of course, it was the will of the people in the referendum, and also already then it was an overwhelming majority of Polish people who decided to join the EU. And ever since, the support for the European Union has been really high. But then again, this is the very basic question. And if you look deeper, you see that the truth is a bit more complicated.
And then is there this kind of enthusiasm in the Netherlands, Martine, as well? I mean, 90%, I guess it will be very difficult for many countries in Europe to reach as a percentage. But you come from a country which was ever championing closer integration, both in Benelux, where basically you inspire the rest of Europe to get together, and also in Europe in general. And in the same time, while you were enthusiastic about this integration on a regional and European level, Netherlands was always insisting on national sovereignty. It remained very high on the Dutch agenda in a number of areas, be it finances, taxes, social services, until recently also military cooperation. Enthusiasm, is there as high? And what is the reason for such a Dutch approach to, so to say, keeping the sovereignty on a number of issues?
I think that's a great topic for a whole PhD study. But if I can only speak from my own experience on this, and I think if I talk to people, what you often hear them say is, yeah, we should really look at which topics we keep on which level. And we do that in the Netherlands, but we also do that internationally, apparently, that we try to see where, what is the best level to make those policies, and where do you lie, how do you say, not the leadership, but the executive power in the end. And sometimes that might be on European level, but I think on social affairs, a lot of people feel it's so national, it's so measured to the situation and the context that it's very hard to play that up. But if you look, for example, at climate policies or migration or a common foreign policy, then a lot more people will think, yeah, it makes sense and it's logical to scale that up. So I can't speak for all the Dutch people, but if I talk to individuals, this is often what you get back. About enthusiasm, that's your first question. In my bubble, most people are very enthusiastic about Europe and the EU without losing sight of the things that can be improved.
I guess you come from a party where 10 out of 10 persons would be Euro enthusiastic, to call it like that, and you have been actually campaigning on this Euro enthusiasm, right?
Yes.
which actually was quite remarkable to see. And in this sense of Euro enthusiasm, also the European Union treaties were written. There was this clause over there saying that there should be an ever closer union. And it sounded like a religion to many of the European politicians, believing that the EU should be an ever closer union. There was a huge enthusiasm in Poland about it. That enthusiasm was felt across the heart of the European continent. But yeah, as Milosz, you hinted, that perhaps is not anymore the case in Poland. There seem to be different tendencies these days. Perhaps there is a desire to have an ever closer union in terms of achieving same economic standards across the board, but not in terms of the democratic standards and values.
Polish society is divided, and the Polish population is divided because our political scene is extremely divided and polarized. So again, we are as a society a very pro-European and Euro-enthusiastic society, but then there are different reasons to be pro-European and different background for that. So it was very interesting when Martine said that, you know, in the Netherlands, people believe that different policies or different areas should be ruled or regulated by different levels. So some things should be done on the national level, others on the European level. I think in Poland, like in many other Central Eastern European countries, historically there has been a huge distrust towards the state as such. So many Polish people see the European Union as something more actually effective, something more, you know, better, something less corrupted, something that can fix the things that the government cannot fix. So this is why the support and trust towards the European Union is higher than towards the Polish government, because Polish people do not, in general, trust in the government, and they believe that the EU can do things better. So this is one part of the answer. And still, if you look at this political division, supporters of the government, or maybe even the government itself, is trying to tell us that we do not need an ever closer union of people. Contrarily, we need a European Union that is only a trade agreement organization. And on the other side, if you are a hardcore voter of the opposition parties, you truly believe in ever closer union of people. So you believe in a more democratic, more citizen-driven European Union. So there is a discussion right now in Poland about the future of the EU, and this discussion is attached to the discussion about the future of Poland, about if you are with the government or with the opposition.
Ever closer union apparently seems to be differently perceived by different political elites these days, and that's okay. We live in democracy. That's normal. But in this sense of ever closer union, which was included in the treaties, there was also the sense of ever closer union among all the peoples of Europe. And that included also integrating the countries that were not part or are still not part of the union. That's led to this big bang enlargement in 2004, and then followed by the joining of Bulgaria and Romania in 2007, and finally Croatia in 2013. Many in the member states, especially those who were in the European Union from the very beginning, have had doubts whether this was a smart decision. Especially there were concerns whether the countries in the eastern flank of the Union have been admitted perhaps prematurely. Today's geopolitics, the analysts and the experts who say was the decision of 2004 to 2007 for the EU to enlarge. From today's perspective, it sounds like one of the wisest and the smartest decision. The analysts would also call this essential in terms of what is happening now in Ukraine with the Russian invasion. Do you think in the Netherlands, which has always had kind of more skepticism, Martine, do you think the people agree that there is this same kind of need for wisdom these days when it comes to enlargement?
I think it depends on who you ask. Some people will, but I'm not quoting numbers here. It's a feeling of what you hear around you. Some do see the value in it, and especially the war in Ukraine, of course, brings it home that it is ever more connected. People who deal with European affairs or who work across borders will see the need more than people who work in their direct surroundings. But that's not a given. It really depends on people themselves. There's no one view on it, I guess, in the Netherlands at the moment, if you ask individual citizens. As a country as a whole, I see the move towards more integration, because you see positive news, positive messages more and more about integrating the Western Balkans, for example, more in the EU. So I think personally, I would say, yes, we will get there. It might take some time. And it is super cruel that we need a war to actually drive that home, that message. But yes, there is slowly more enthusiasm, I would say, into further integration.
Unlike the Netherlands, which has always been divided on this issue, and we know traditionally Netherlands has been raising doubts about the accession of many countries, imposing sometimes strict but very often very, very fair conditions. In Poland, there seems to be a broad consensus about the enlargement of the European Union. No matter whether one talks to the government or to the opposition, Poland has been always a vocal supporter for the enlargement of the Union, in particular to the Western Balkans. Nowadays, we hear Poland, perhaps even louder, advocating for the enlargement of the Union with the countries like Ukraine and Moldova. How do you explain this enlargement enthusiasm in Poland, Milosz?
I mean, again, we should start with the fact that most Polish people think that European Union is something good, right? It's a great peace project. And in Poland, there's a common sense, there's this feeling that something, of course, part of our common memory, that something terrible happened after the Second World War, and this part of Europe was under the Soviet occupation in one way or another. So for us, as Polish people, we always felt part of the West, part of Europe. And it was our goal of the entire, I would say, society, nation, but also of all the elites after 1989. So after the democratic transition, the goal was one: we must join NATO and we must join the EU. And it was, a common goal of everybody in the country. And we feel the same about other countries that were part of the Soviet bloc or Eastern bloc. We think that they all have a right to belong to the West. And in these days, belonging to the West means belonging to NATO and to the European Union. So for us, there is absolutely no question about that the final goal of this historical development is that all countries from Europe will be members of the European Union. So this is why we as Polish people and also all Polish elites support that. And I think also part of the question is the fact that Poland, being the biggest country in this part of Europe, in Central Eastern Europe, is trying to be a regional leader and voicing these issues, advocating for all the countries in the region inside the European Union. So I think Polish elites again feel that this is our obligation, it's their obligation to advocate so that all these countries that before were part of the Eastern Bloc have an easier way to the European Union. And with Ukraine, the situation is a bit different because there has always been very strong ties between Poland and Ukraine. For many years, we felt we are actually the advocate of Ukraine in the European Union. And if we feel it right now the same way, even more so after this full front part of war started in February 24th this year. So yeah, I think for Polish people, for Polish elites, there is absolutely no question that all European states that want to be part of the European Union should be supported in this process.
Yeah, and we can see that in the policies of the Polish government and in discourse of the Polish politicians. But let's be fair, the European political elites have had this perception that all the countries that are on the European continent and that fulfill the criteria should become part of the Union, should they wish so. That has been part of the treaties. And even in 2003, almost 20 years ago, next year will be the 20th anniversary, the European Union recognized the countries of the Western Balkans that they have a so-called European perspective, or they basically said that their place is in the membership of the European Union. 20 years later, only one of those of the Western Balkan countries is actually part of the club. Croatia joined in 2013, and over the last in 2 months, it will be over the last decade, a big silence. No further integration of the countries of the Western Balkans in the EU. That has led to change on the situation in the ground, also among the mood of the people. We can see the latest polls in Serbia indicating that now majority of the people do not want Serbia to be a member of the European Union anymore. That is neither a good signal for Serbia, nor it's a good message for the European Union as such. People are becoming skeptical in the region. Let's be honest, Martine. Do you think EU will ever enlarge with the countries of the Western Balkans first and the Ukraine and Moldova? Or some say, will EU ever reunite fully?
Short answer, yes. I don't know if I'm speaking from hope or from reason, but yeah, it might take some time, and it will involve a lot of steps, and it will take leadership, not only from the Netherlands, but from all the European heads of state and the European Commission, European Parliament, all of us, basically, and also us as citizens, to just keep driving the message forward, but also from our friends in the Balkans and in other countries that want to join the EU. It's up to us all to keep this on the agenda, because without doing that, I think we can lose hope very easily, like you also see in Serbia now. But it's not enough to talk. We've been talking for a long time, so it's also about time that we start to action things, and it's not only us, but it's everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's time to deliver results. People want to see the results, and as long as there is no results, I guess the credibility and the popular support will go down, on both sides of the so-called divide, for those who are inside or outside of the club. Milosz, what would you say from your Polish experience? What would you suggest to these countries which are slowly losing hope? At the end of the day, we saw that next to fulfilling the criteria, there is also geopolitical decision behind the membership, as it was the case with Romania and Bulgaria, or as it was now with the express decision to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova with a speed of light never seen, so to say, in the European Union. Bosnia also received a recommendation, surprisingly and positively, from the Commission to get a candidate status. How do we push this process to be both credible, but also predictable, and something that would move, as Martine said, from words into action?
I don't know what I can advise to the countries of Western Balkans and other countries who want to join the EU, because I think they are doing the best they can in their own speed. That depends on the political situation and social economic situation. I would rather advise our partners within the European Union to do everything they can to speed this process up. And there are probably many ways of speeding this process up: by supporting people there, by supporting civil society there, by supporting free media there, by supporting independent judiciary there. So that there is many things that we can already do there in supporting all these actors and stakeholders who will be decisive when the time comes to take the final decision. So I think societies there, they're doing their best, and especially civil society and independent, again, media people, and we must support them. And of course, from the geopolitical perspective, for us, again, since 1989, the decision was very clear: or we rejoin the West, we go where our place is, so to the European family, or we stay in the East, where now Putin is. So, and this is the same question that these countries are answering themselves right now for themselves. But this is, first of all, the question that Western European leaders have to ask. Like, where do they want to see these nations? Where do they want to see Serbia, for example, and others? With us building the common European future, or with Vladimir Putin building his dream about Europe that's divided, that's dependent on Russia, and that cannot develop to its fullest because of all these divisions.
Interesting. I mean, you're both mentioning the thing West, and while the continent was very often seen as East and West, from the non-European perspective, all countries from Europe are basically seen as West. So it's very interesting shift of paradigm that we have witnessed on the continent over the last 10, 20 years of how the countries perceive themselves also in global context. And perhaps, Milosz, it's important to underline that you are in the leadership of the European Liberal Forum. I guess you do not make differentiation there between the organizations coming from EU and non-EU.
I mean, we do not. We work with organizations from both EU countries and non-EU countries, and we have extremely active members from non-EU countries, from Western Balkans, from Georgia, and many other regions. We work all together for the future of Europe, because European liberalism is as important in EU countries as in non-EU countries, and our common future, European future, depends on the development and progress in both of these parts of the same jigsaw.
I guess this is not about self-praise, but it's also good to mention that it is a way forward, basically, to start integrating, as you said, in the civil sector. And this video cast that we are bringing is together in cooperation of a Bosnian organization, the Boris Divkovic Foundation, together with D66 from the Netherlands, which participate as equal partners and supported by the European Liberal Forum. And that shows that among the liberals, perhaps there is an incentive and understanding the liberals can work together. And also, we are not discussing only enlargement, how to get these countries inside the club, but we are discussing how to make the European Union functional. And in that sense, there was this conference on the future of Europe that lasted for a year. Actually, it was very interesting exercise, and Elp was very much involved. You both guys were involved in the deliberations. There were some excellent recommendations that came out on the future of the Union and how it should be reformed. Now, there have been proposals for some deeper integration in certain areas, like, for example, perhaps even setting up a European army. Or there was something that was suggested, praised by many, feared by others too, like removing the unanimity in terms of the foreign policy. Do you think these recommendations from the conference on the future of Europe will ever see the daylight, Martine?
Shall I again say I hope so? It is a tricky question, Emil. I would say personally, do take them into account and dare to experiment, because we can stick around with what we know, what we have, but we can also stick our necks out. I don't know if that's an English expression too. Our heads above the maize fields and see what happens if we try something different. And we can always turn back if we decide it's not working like that without a veto. But yeah, be brave and take some steps forward, I would say.
Including European military?
Yeah.
I remember the Dutch have already been suggesting for nearly a decade now pooling and sharing of military resources.
It's already happening. We already have an army, at least in the Netherlands, that's working together with the Germans and the Belgians on sharing materials and a lot of things more. And I think that's growing bigger and bigger. So
Milosz, these recommendations from the conference on the future of Europe, deeper union, integration, possible or not possible, as long as we do not see really rule of law entrenched in Poland and Hungary?
Yeah, I think there are two different things, two different questions that we should answer. Like, does the EU need a reform to be more effective, more citizen-friendly, let's say user-friendly, closer to people's needs? And then I'm answering definitely yes. And little exercises like the conference, I think they're helpful because they steer the discussion. We have some recommendations. And just like Martine, I'm very hopeful that some of these recommendations will become actual reforms that will make European Union more a safer place, a better place for citizens, a space that citizens all across Europe can trust in and can follow and want to follow. And this is one thing. And of course, there's the question about problems that we have in different member states. And of course, we can talk about Poland and Hungary. We should talk about Poland and Hungary, but it's not only that, right? We will have more problems. We'll see what will happen in Italy soon, and in other places. But yeah, this is the obligation of the EU to fix the things that are happening in Poland and Hungary, because if there is anybody breaking the rules in one of the member states, basically the rights of all European citizens are endangered. So if somebody is breaking the European rules, the treaties, in Poland, also the rights of citizens of the Netherlands are put in danger because this is one system, and Europe as such, European Union as such, cannot afford to work in a system where one of the parts is broken. So I have absolutely no doubts that the EU should use all the measures possible to fix the system here, wherever it's broken, but also think about the future and more general reforms. So these two things should go in parallel.
Across the board, not only to make the European Union itself more citizen-friendly, as you said, but also working together to fix the national, even local problems, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Wherever right now the union has competences and should act, and we should think about the future, in which areas it should have competences and act.
And can this process of making the EU more citizen-friendly, more in service to the citizens, be parallel with the process of enlargement, or shall we do it as some say, first reform then enlarge? What do you both think?
For me, it's parallel. For me, there are two different processes, and I definitely think that people in Bosnia and Macedonia and in other countries should not pay for mistakes that Polish or Hungarian governments have been taking. Of course, this is a lesson that we are all learning right now from the Polish or Hungarian example, and we should learn this lesson as a European Union. But other states who are willing, who want to become members, should not pay for this. And so these two processes should go parallel, one next to another.
Is this the opinion shared by D66, Martine? I'm not going to ask you about the Dutch, because the Dutch opinion, I guess, is quite varied, but D66.
I honestly don't know where my party stands on it, but I personally, yes, I agree with Milosz. Don't let countries that are not involved in the mistakes we're making now pay for it. Take the processes parallel and drive it forward.
And be creative. I guess it's worth noting for the audience that the European Liberal Forum, with its pool of experts from across the continent, is working on a paper which is called Staged Integration in the European Union, which would actually provide for the countries that are aspirants to join a possibility to join the European Union in step by step. So not to wait until the entire process is fully completed, which might take years or even decade or even more in countries of Ukraine, but to allow them to enjoy the fruits of membership or participation in the programs of the Union much faster. Now, if the final goal is the same, membership in the European Union, then there was this new initiative launched by the French President Emmanuel Macron in March this year, in the aftermath of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, supported by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, for European political community. Even the first summit took place in Prague just a month ago, with participation of all EU member states. UK was there, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Western Balkan countries, all the aspirants for membership, Iceland and Norway. What do you think of this initiative?
It sounds a bit like ELF, I would say. It's what we've been practicing all along with the foundations all around Europe, to work together and to pool our resources together, our brains together, and look where we can actually move forward with each other. So I'm happy that at the higher levels they are taking the example and pushing it forward.
Milosz, what do you think? Is this replacement for enlargement, perhaps?
No, I don't see it as a replacement for enlargement. I just see it as another platform to promote our values. So if we have another platform that maybe right now can be successful because of one reason or another to promote European values, liberal values, open democracy, I'm all for it. but I do not see it as a replacement of enlargement or an alternative to enlargement.
Okay, I thank you very much. Do you have anything to add at the end, or are we just going to close it up on this level of enthusiasm, believing that we need more cooperation, deeper integration, and more citizen-friendly union?
Let's leave it at this level of optimism and enthusiasm, because it's good to finish like that.
Yep.
I thank you very much, both of you, for this interactive discussion. I can say on my part, I enjoyed it very much. And I hope that our audience will enjoy the discussion too. And I hope it will motivate many of them to become members either of the ELF organizations that are active across Europe, or even members of the parties that belong to the liberal family of ALDE or the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament. I thank you very much for the participation, and I thank to everybody in the audience for following this discussion. Stay tuned for the next edition of the podcast within the European integration project of ELF. Thank you very much.